Hello and welcome to Archive West Texas. I'm your host, Gordon Wilkerson, joined today by our producer, Rachel Boyd. Today we're talking about a place where West Texas history isn't finished, sealed, or tucked away. It's still being uncovered, studied, and even shared with the public. Lubbock Lake Landmark is a National Historic Landmark and a unit of the Museum of Texas Tech. It preserves evidence of people, animals, and environment spanning more than 11,000 years right here in Lubbock. We're pleased today to welcome Susan Rowe, who's the Education Program Coordinator at Lubbock Lake Landmark, as our guest today. Susan works at the intersection of archaeology, education, and community engagement, helping visitors understand not just what's been found, but why it matters. Susan, welcome to Archive West Texas.
Thank you for having me.
Let's start with you. Where did you grow up, and what experience early on shaped your interest in history, science, and education?
Well, I grew up in the hill country, not far from LBJ Ranch. I believe that having that history take place right in front of my eyes focused my attention more on history and where we come from. I'm a big genealogy buff. I like to know where I come from, and I feel like a lot of folks want to know where they originate, where their family came from. I like culture. I like listening to stories of people, their family histories, and traditions. I get into stuff like that. I just find it fascinating. I came to Lubbock in 2006 as a graduate student, like probably many of your listeners, and I landed at the Lubbock Lake Landmark 2007, and I've been there ever since.
So where was your undergraduate work?
It was various places because I went to Schreiner University when it was Schreiner College in Kerrville. And then I took off because I wanted to be out on my own and do my own thing, and didn't really know if I liked school or not, and just I wanted to get out there and do stuff. So I took a long hiatus. And then later on, after I had done career, I thought, I need to go back to school. So I finished up my undergrad degree at UTPB, University of Texas at Permian Basin. And then I had a wonderful professor, art history professor, that encouraged me to go to grad school. And I said, well, I'm really tired of going to school, but I'll try anyway. And I got accepted to the Heritage and Museum Sciences program over at Texas Tech. And here I am.
So what first got you to the Lubbock Lake Landmark? Was it a part-time job affiliated with the program?
It is with the program. I started off as the education intern. It just so happened that while I was being the intern, my immediate supervisor, she moved to Austin to work for the Texas Historic Commission. And the job was opened, and I applied and got the job.
There you go.
Yeah. So, you never know where you're going to land. So any opportunity you have, you need to take it because you don't know. I tell students all the time, you don't know where that experience is going to take you, so go for it.
So when did the Lubbock Lake Landmark establish itself as a branch of the museum? Give us a little bit of the backstory, the history on how the site developed.
Okay, so 2026 is the 90th year of discovery of the landmark. It was discovered in 1936. There's a story about that. The two high school boys were out at the site because that was a site where the city was looking for another water source. Like even 90 years ago, we were concerned about water. They were looking for a water source. They knew there had been there's active springs at that site because George W. Singer had to set up the first general store, happened to be at that site. And George W. Singer was the first postmaster of Lubbock when it became a town. So they knew water had been there because his store was there, and it was by springs. There's natural springs out there.
So where was the site of the store? Is that where the museum is now?
No, it's along our archaeology trail. And there we have a marker out there where the site of the store. And in the 80s, they did do excavation on the store itself. And you can see a little bit of, as you're walking by, a little bit of the tarp that they have laid over the site to protect it. In the 30s, the teenagers had found a projectile point, or arrowhead as folks call them. And one of the boys' mother or aunt worked for Dr. Holden Dr. William Holden, who any Texas Tech graduate knows Holden Hall. It's named after him. He was the first director of the West Texas Museum, which is now Texas Tech University Museum. He looked at that and he realized it was something really spectacular. It turned out to be a Folsom Point, and he got with colleagues across the region and the United States, and they started doing test sites, and out of all of the dredge that had been dug up from whenever they were trying to revive the springs that were out there. And so that was in the 30s and the 40s. They did some excavation. Then after, it was sporadic after that, but then 1972 and 73, the summer field research program began. And that was with Dr. Eileen Johnson, who is still the director of the landmark. She's still here. And they've been doing research at that site ever since.
Was there an initial find that sort of established the site as, hey, there's really something here?
Well, when they found that point, and then the people came in, I shouldn't say the scientists came in, or the archaeologists, I guess, and started doing more excavations, they would find evidence of people living there alongside skeletal remains of animals. No human remains, but skeletal remains of animals. And they were positioned so that the researchers felt like it was maybe a hunting site or a butchering site, because within the bones that were left, they would find scrape marks. Maybe they were taking a rock or another bone and scraping, getting meat off bones and things like that. So it seems like, to me, as an observer to the research, as I'm watching them, that perhaps someone's sitting there and they're scraping bones, and then they're putting them to the side and just leave them there, for animals that are probably, I would imagine, circling around, but leaving those parts. And so what's significant about, lots of things are significant about the landmark, but what is really significant about the landmark is that at every level of soil composition, as the soil is developing and building, there's evidence of people, whether it be a bone tool that was made from a mammoth bone or a short-faced bear bone, or burned caliche from fire pits, and then more of the projectile points or the arrowheads at every level. So at every level of composition for the last 12,000 years, there is evidence of people.
Fascinating site. You mentioned that the site was discovered by a couple of teenagers, found a Folsom Point, took it to Dr. Curry. Clearly, you found animal remains here.
Yes.
Let's talk about how old these animals are.
Okay.
You mentioned mammoths. You mentioned the flat-nosed bear, which I'm pretty sure that's extinct at this point.
Oh, yes.
And it seems like I remember seeing a saber-toothed cat of some kind out there.
So we have full skeletal remains that had been found there. That's the whole thing of a Columbian mammoth. And people will say, oh, there's woolly mammoth. Well, no, the woolly mammoths were further north where the ice is. They're Columbian mammoth, and they were extinct maybe about 12,000 years ago.
So what's the distinction between a Columbian mammoth and a woolly mammoth?
Glad you asked. A Columbian mammoth stood about 14 feet tall, and they don't have fur. Where the woolly mammoths, they have obviously the hair. And we know that because they have found woolly mammoths within the glacial, when things are melting and stuff like that, they find woolly mammoths. The Columbian mammoths were further south, and they were in North America. They have found those in Colorado and even in Wyoming. So that ice didn't go all the way down when we had the last ice age. All along, now the U.S., but North America, and then down even into South America. So, there was a lot of grassland, and they were big animals, so they needed a lot. As grazers, they needed a lot to eat. So, yeah, about 12,000 years ago, and they were here at the same time Clovis people were here. So the Clovis people were here maybe 11,800 years ago, and we know this by materials they left behind, and researchers found points that they made, like spear points, that looked like, and this is how you distinguish between, giving names to things. So the first time a researcher found a point that had these particular features was Clovis, New Mexico. Okay, so come from Clovis, which is 2-hour drive, but it's along that water system, Blackwater Draw, come into what is now Lubbock Lake Landmark. They find those points, the same features. And they said, well, the first time we found one of these was in Clovis, New Mexico. So obviously these people were making that track down that water system. So, yeah. And then the Folsom point that was found by the 2 teenagers. So people from Folsom, New Mexico. And the same thing, a point was discovered in Folsom, New Mexico, that the features were completely different from what they had seen before. And so they named it Folsom Point, and those were also found at what's now the landmark. So that gives you an idea of the fact that people were moving around, following animals, because there was a big water system there. So that water is still, we still have that ancient trail that goes through Lubbock, and then heads up into the Brazos River.
So I interrupted you when you were about to start talking about the flat-nosed bear.
A short-faced bear.
Short-faced bear. Short-faced bear. All right, let's get it right.
Short. It's smushed. It's a smush. The snout is not as long as the bears we have today. It's a smush. I don't know why, but that's just. I don't know. But they were all over North America as well. Those bears.
Even in the plains.
Yeah, even on the plains. We've also had the bison, which is commonly known as buffalo, a bison antiquus, which is an ancient bison. They were here. But interestingly, and we talk a little bit about that, I talk about that with groups that come in, bison, they adapted as the climate changed. They adapted, and we know there's a National Bison Day in November. So they're a really significant piece of our culture and our history, good and bad, but the mammoth didn't, adapt. So they died out. Yeah.
You've said before, I think that most people, and I probably fall into this category, think of Lubbock as, hey, we've been around about 100 years, maybe a little longer.
Yeah.
You work every day at a site where there's a much deeper, a much more robust history.
Right.
Why is that so central to your work?
Dr. Johnson, Eileen Johnson, tells a story about one of the mayors in the town, and I can't recall who it was, but he would always say that he knew Lubbock, Texas was the oldest city in North America because of the evidence of the Clovis people here. So the longest populated. They say St. Augustine is, or somewhere else, He always claimed that it was Lubbock.
Because we had people here.
Because we had people here for 12,000 years. So you asked what is significant, or why is it important? Is that what you were asking me?
Or how does that affect how you educate people? I mean, that's not something you think of.
Yeah, that's
when
exactly
you drive through Lubbock.
Well, when I first got to that job, I had been in it maybe 2 or 3 years. During the summer at the site, the excavation site that's on the site, on Lubbock Lake site, they found skeletal remains of a bison, okay? The ribs, the vertebra. So when they find large bones like that, or bones that have been in the ground for thousands of years, and this is the first time they've seen air, kind of cool. So they would create a plaster jacket, like a cast, to go over it so they can take it to the lab and then further excavated in the lab in a controlled environment. So they have this plaster cast going on, and then they have to dig it out. So they're going underneath to dig it out. And below that, maybe an inch below that, was part of a mammoth bone. And that changed my whole idea about what this place was, because I thought, wow, that is really cool they're looking at this bison, but yet as they're doing excavation, right below it is evidence of a mammoth being here. To me, that was really powerful. And I think a lot of times when I am doing programming for the kids that come in, because we see K through 12 kids coming in quite a bit with field trips, summer programs, and things like that, they will tell me that they're doing stories for science on animals. I go, oh, well, that's cool. What animals? Well, animals that are not here, animals polar bears, they're all important, polar bears, red pandas, things like that. And they're real excited about it. And I think, oh man, we have animals here. Animals live here. And people do. I mean, we have fox in my neighborhood. I've seen raccoons and possums, in the neighborhoods, but to see them out in the wild, out at our nature preserve, every once in a while, you can see them scurrying around. To see those and to know that we have animals, those native animals are still here, is really what I try to encourage those kids to think about, and get an understanding of, they're here and we need to protect. We need to protect them. It's all a part of protecting the environment, So that really, having them have an understanding of those ancient animals, I think is important, because they're not just here. And I know the kids, they can't drive themselves anywhere, and their history is their parents, and they need to know their family histories. I think is very important too. But for them to take pride in where they come from, to know that this was here, and people were here when these animals were here. And that's cool. How cool. That's so cool,
It's unique.
It's very unique.
In addition to the education aspects of your job, the site is still a research.
Yes.
You have active digs going on in the summers.
Yes.
Tell our listeners how that works.
Okay. So every summer in July, starting the first part of July, they open up the site and they do excavations for 6 weeks, like from 1st of July to the middle of August. This is an exciting time.
Pick the hottest time of the year.
Yeah, they pick the hottest time of the year. But usually the researchers are pretty young, and they have big shade. They have the pop-up shades, so they're okay. They're okay. They start early in the morning, 6:45. So by 1:30, they're out of there anyway. But it's a good opportunity for the community to be involved, because we like to have volunteers come out and help. The crews usually are volunteers. They're students from all over the world. They come to get experience in field methods for archaeology or anthropology, or paleontology. So they'll come to the landmark, to that program, which has been going on for 50 years, because they know they'll get a good education and a firm foundation for their research, whatever it's going to be. And it's an exciting time for us, because we allow people to take a tour of the site. We have archaeology days in July, and so folks can come in and talk to the researchers. We go into our research lab, and they can talk to folks in there and learn about what students and the other researchers have been looking at during the summer. The community volunteer program is pretty exciting, especially for young people who think they might want to be an archaeologist or a paleontologist, because when you're 13 years old, you can volunteer in the research lab. And when you're 15, you can volunteer and work at the excavation site and actually do excavation with the research and be part of the history of the landmark, which is kind of cool.
Incredible opportunity. Susan, what do visitors find most surprising when they get to your site?
That's a really good question. A lot of them don't realize that animals were at the site, and those ancient animals were here in this region, or even, here in North America. And the fact that people were here when those animals were here. A lot of people don't think or don't realize, and these are a lot of folks that are from out of town sometimes, that a place like Lubbock would have anything like this, way out here in Lubbock, way out here in West Texas, those things aren't supposed to happen.
For our listeners that have never actually made the trek out to the site, or for citizens that haven't gone out there, or even for the broader area of West Texas, tell us what the site features. Okay. You mentioned an auditorium. I know you have programs. Talk through some of the opportunities that our listeners would have to actually come to the site and learn about it.
Well, I'll start out by saying, and I have my little elevator speech, we're a site that tells you the story of the continuous human occupation of this region, and even North America, for the last 12,000 years. Hunters have been here hunting Columbian mammoths, bison antiquus, which are ancient bison, and animals that we have here today. They would probably hunt rabbits, maybe prairie dogs, anything for sustenance. And it's a good way to understand how people of the past use resources available to them to survive and to thrive. We have 4 miles of hiking trails because we are a 336-acre nature preserve, and our trails wind within that preserve. And along the trails, you can see at any point in time coyotes, jackrabbits, cottontail rabbits, sometimes a prairie dog or two, burrowing owls, snakes, and just animals that call the Southern High Plains home. We have programs throughout the year. We like to cater to, well, I should say we. I think it's important for the kids to come in and understand and learn about the Lubbock community, or before it was Lubbock. So we have 8 weeks of summer youth programs, ages 5 to 12. And during those times, the kids learn how to ID native plants and flowering plants. We've got about 140 different species of wildflowers out on the landmark. So any of those flowers that are blooming while they're on site and while they're doing their summer stuff, we learn how to identify them. So they will know 3 or 4 different flowering plants. Any of the birds that we see. During that time, Mississippi kites are here, and those funny little kingbirds that are they're so gripey all the time, just gripey and fussy. And then, of course, the red-winged blackbirds, which are real popular because they're Texas Tech colors, the red and black. Yeah. So they like that. So the kids will leave knowing a few native species of flowering plants and also birds, and they can say, oh, well, yeah, I know that's a kingbird, and this is a red-winged blackbird. This is a Mississippi kite. So.
And the preserve features land that's basically been undisturbed for centuries.
Yes.
So if somebody's curious as to what this area looked like before agriculture became the predominant industry in the area, this is a great place to look and see what the plains originally.
Right. That's exactly right. This particular spot has never been, a plow has never touched it. Of course, the grazers were here when the bison were here. Then that cowboy Raleigh Burns, in one of his stories, says that he saw 10,000 head of cattle getting water and grazing at that site too. So the cattle, were coming up there. Yeah. The military trails crossed there because the water was there. So it really all focuses around that water.
Are the springs still active?
There's always been water in there. So one of the springs is active, but now we do have water. There's a water in the reservoir. And it's been there, golly, I don't know. I mean, it's been there for about 10 years. I think it has a lot to do with the development, all the land development that's going on. And there's not a place anymore for the water to seep out. So it's finding its places to hit the surface. And the landmark is one of those sites, which I think is very cool personally, because we get waterfowl coming in, watering birds. They'll come through, migrating in, and a lot of them will spend the winter there. And then we have some that come in the spring, and it's a good opportunity for people to see those animals, those birds come through as well.
You were mentioning earlier that you have a new program with the physics department.
Yes.
Talk a little bit about that.
Okay. That was initiated by the physics department, physics and astronomy department. And those folks have come out, and the 4th Friday of the month, and I'm just looking in my mind at my calendar, we have Astronights. It's on our website, and you come out, one of the professors or a student of the department will give a talk about what their study is, something with the atmosphere, planets, different phenomena that you can see in the atmosphere. They have telescopes set up. So after they give the talk, then people are able to see whatever they're wanting to showcase that evening on the telescopes. It seems like a lot of fun. They have also activities for kids to do as well. And it's something new, something that we probably should have been doing for a long time, but it's very, very popular, and they do a really good job explaining those kinds of things to people. And I think it's a really good partnership that we have.
And that runs through May?
Through May, yes, through May. We also will start our night hikes. March, fourth Saturday of the month, from March until September, we have night hikes. And those are fun too, because you can see the animals a lot of times as well. Then summer youth programs, which start up in June and run until the end of July.
What do you hope future generations understand about this place and its importance?
I think that future generations will be very fortunate to have a site like this, to understand how life here on the Southern High Plains started, actually. You know, the way things are going, my goodness. I mean, we have so much growth in this town, even since I've been here in the last 20 years that I've been around, so much growth. Green spaces are going to be few and far between, I'm afraid. And so I think it's very important for the next generation to understand. Also, not to understand and take pride in it, but also to understand so they can take care of it, you know, and to take pride, but then take care of what they've got so they can enjoy and enjoy the site, especially this site, you know, being able to go outside and walk or ride your bicycle, be with your family, be with your friends. And we're always free. You know, it's free of charge. Anything is free there. Even the programs are free as well. So,
all right.
Nice, low cost, fun thing to do.
There you go. Susan, thank you for taking time today to share your story and also the story of the Lubbock Lake Landmark. Provides our listeners with a better understanding of the rich history that Lubbock has, and also the work that's being done to preserve that and share it. That's part of what we're all about here.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening. Hope you'll join us again next week for another edition of Archive West Texas.